What is up, Flutter devs? Today we're going to talk about how to define our own custom test method so that we can apply certain changes to the test configuration for a whole bunch of tests instead of repeating that configuration over and over again. Let's get into it. Hopefully you've watched some of these videos before where you've seen us write a whole bunch of tests. I guess if you haven't, let me give you a real quick example of what we're dealing with. In the processing APIs, there are a lot of little screenshots of what you should see when you use processing. And we've used those examples to write a whole bunch of tests over here on the left that essentially recreate the same screenshot. So here under color, we have these goldens. And if we click on them, we'll see these 100 by 100 images, these screenshots. All of these come from, they're replicated from the processing API docs. Let's see, those look like, okay, so there's another example that are from the docs. So we use the same code that processing uses, but with Flutter processing, and we paint the same thing. And these examples are always 100 by 100 with a pixel density of 1.0, which then led to us creating this method right here available inside of our tests that will change the tester so that the canvas that we're drawing to is 100 by 100 and the pixel density ratio is 1.0. If you're curious about the device pixel ratio, on mobile devices, there's actually more than, was it one? I'm not sure what the base unit is, but the point is there's a higher pixel density. If you actually took a 1 inch by 1 inch slice of a desktop computer screen versus a 1 inch by 1 inch slice from a mobile device, there are more pixels per inch on a mobile device than there are on the screen. And what this means is that when you size things in terms of pixels, you need to actually increase their size on mobile to retain the same physical size. You need more pixels to occupy the same physical space. And so that's why in the test system, you can specify different pixel ratios. The point is, we're always testing on desktop. We're always simulating a desktop rendering. So we're just going to use a 1.0 device pixel ratio, which is the baseline essentially. And again, all of these examples are 100 by 100. But this method is called over and over again. We call it at the beginning of every test. It's called there, it's called there, it's called there. This is a repetition of the same thing over and over again. Developers have to remember to invoke it. And if we ever need to change anything, I mean, hopefully we could just change it inside this method. But if not, we have to repeat the change everywhere. So instead, what we're going to do is create a test method, our own test method, that calls this automatically. And then instead of saying test goldens, we will call whatever our test name happens to be. So let's go do that right now. And we're only going to take the time to apply it in a few places because you don't need to watch me do that 100 times. But actually, before we do that, it is important that we verify that all the tests pass, because then we're going to need to run Flutter test again and see if any of them failed after our changes. That is, after all, why we have tests. So we should see 53 or 54 passing tests here. I can't remember exactly how many we have. 54. Okay, all tests passed. That's what's important. Now let's write a method, and I don't remember if the signature needs to be asynchronous or not. I guess it's not. So we will call it processing spec test. We are specifically interested in processing, and this configuration applies to the specification online, and it's a test. So I think that's a reasonable name. And the purpose of this method is to run a test like we normally do, but to also configure the window for spec test, which means we need a description for the test, and we need to take in the same kind of callback that we usually take into a test, which I believe it is future void function widget tester. And that is the actual test. I think that's what it is. And then we're going to call test goldens, because these are always golden tests. And we're going to pass in the description and the test, and we will, I guess that's good enough. So you see that it compiles, right? Which means we got the signature correct here up on the test callback. Let's go back to color test. See, we're calling test goldens right here. We're calling the same thing in both places. Now, if that's all we did, it wouldn't accomplish anything. It would do exactly what the test goldens implementations are already doing. But we can come up here and we can say configure window for spec test, and we can pass in the, oh, actually that's not going to work. Sorry. We need the tester. So here's what we actually have to do. We have to implement our own test method. And we're going to say await test tester. So we're going to call the test method that we're given, but before we call the test method that we are given, we are going to configure window for spec test. And now a developer can pass whatever test they want into this. And that test will first be configured to run at 100 by 100 with a 1.0 pixel ratio. But that's not quite all that I want to do. I don't know if Flutter resets these values or not when it's done. So here's what we're going to do as well. We're going to say original size is equal to tester.binding.window.physical size test value. And we're going to say original density equals tester.binding.window.device pixel ratio. Okay, I guess we have to just ask for the physical size. Actually, this might be wrong too. Because I think, let me see, tester binding window. Is there a clear all? Let's do that instead. I was going to save the values and restore the values, but instead, let's just clear all the test values when we're done. I actually don't know which of those two approaches is better overall, but the point is, we don't necessarily want this configuration outliving the test, because then maybe the next test doesn't want to be 100 by 100, and yet that's what we've done here. So we will configure ourselves for a spec test, we will run the test, and then we will clear those test values to go back to the normal state of things. And then with this method available to us, we'll come back to color test. We will get rid of that configuration line, and we will say processing spec test. And we will do that throughout this one file. And then if it works, I won't make you suffer through changing all the other files. All right, save that. And then we'll come down to the terminal and we will once again say Flutter test. And everything still passes, which means our change is good. So what did we do here? We created our own testing method. Now, at the end of the day, you eventually need to invoke Flutter's standard test method so that the Flutter test tooling knows to run the test. But you can keep wrapping that over and over again with your own methods that do stuff before and after that test runs. In fact, even this test right here is a golden test. We call test goldens, right? And test goldens is going to do the same kind of thing. Now, this is going to be a lot more complicated because it's doing a lot more stuff, but check this out. A golden test wraps a test too. It's the same strategy. So there's nothing special here. Like, you don't need any special access to anything. You do your stuff before the test, then you run the test, then you possibly do stuff after the test, and then you can give that your own test name, and you can use that test method throughout your code. In Flutter, that is how you create a custom test method and do custom things in a bunch of tests. Now, off camera, I'm going to go make this change to every other test in the code base, but after that, in the next video, we should return, I think, to the example app and continue making that ready for production. So I'll see you then.